I'm doing great. How about yourself, Ryan?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm working through some things that we're going to touch upon this evening, but yes, otherwise I'm doing okay.
That good, huh?
That good. Oh, hold on, I got to my love light on. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, it's been a while since we've been live, and a lot has happened. So I wanted to take a this time, if you will, to kind of show people how you and I work together, talk through some things, and try and build a foundation for something that I think you and I and others are going to be working on in the future. So, long story short, I'm having some trouble with my adoption situation in my heart and in my mind, and it's things that you have kind of been privy to in the sense that whether it be me canceling last moment or things that have Jackie and I have talked to you about here on this show, but it's not necessarily to talk all about me. It's really to talk about what I'm finding recently, even just as recent as a few days ago, is that adoption is tough. It can be like a very it can be a mindset that's kind of like it feels like it's dropped over you, right? And you don't really realize you're inside the bubble until you start I would say running into trouble with maybe your family and your friends, and you're not giving yourself Are You a Cat and things of that nature. So long story short, tonight I wanted to talk about adoption and how I'm working through things, and also kind of see if we can get anybody else who might be adopted, get them some information and get them in on the conversation, because I'm learning a lot through talking about it over the last couple days, even really connecting with my family and friends, things I should have done sooner, because I kept saying I was fine. And I kept saying I'm grateful. I'm grateful, but without going into too much detail, I am grateful, but as the weeks and days go on, I'm starting to realize that this just might not be, this might be something that I'm not ready for right now. And suppressing it and not speaking about it to anybody, whether it be a therapist or a family or a friend, family member or friend, it's impeding on my marriage, it's impeding on my friendships, and I'm going to start working on it. So, any questions? I know that you've been a big part of my life, and you actually were somebody who's mentioned it before, and I remember ignoring it. But
So, what's your concerns about adoption?
so I'm glad that you asked. So let me play a little bit here with the screen. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Hold on. Sorry. Here we go. Hold on. Yeah. So can you see that? Can others
I
see it?
can't read it. Let me see if
Let's
I
see.
can magnify it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think anybody else will be able to really read it either. Let's see if
Yeah,
I
I
can
can't
get
read it.
it. There we go.
That's a little better.
A little bit better. All
Mhm.
right. So, John Anthony, you asked what am I feeling about my adoption? Well, it turns
I
out
said,
that
what are your concerns?
concerns. Well, let me read this first and see, and just kind of explain that this is something that I'm realizing, or these are some things that I'm realizing or finding people who are adopted have been they struggle with. And this dialogue that I have here, and it's just AI overview on Google. Uh, People have complex, varied feelings about adoption, encompassing deep gratitude and joy for finding family, alongside potential struggles with identity, loss, rejection, and feeling other. I'm guessing that other was perhaps an option. Oh, I'm feeling other, with outcomes often depending on factors like age, adoption, openness, support, and cultural background. While many adoptees and birth parents find peace, others experience lasting trauma, highlighting adoption as a multifaceted journey, not a simple happy ending. Um, and so you asked what again? I'm worried about. You asked me what I'm worried about.
No, I asked you what your concerns are. There's a difference.
I'm not really having any
So, what are you concerned of
concerns.
losing or not getting around adoption? What are you concerned it's making it mean about you or about your situation? What's your difficulties?
I know you're asking and you're looking for me to kind of pinpoint what I'm afraid of losing or not getting, and so I'm going to jump to these other bullet points here because it's really hard to put it's really hard to put your finger on it sometimes. I'm finding,
Okay.
and this is for other adoptees as well. Um, the identity thing, questions about belonging, feeling different, and navigating a dual heritage. This is something that I didn't really think about until Monica and I started dating. But Monica, she actually factored in my heritage a lot in my behavior, in my mannerisms, in many things when she profiled me. Loss and rejection, even with loving families, feelings of loss, abandonment, or being unwanted can surface, as can fears that birth parents didn't love them enough. Trauma, early loss can lead to attachment issues, fear of intimacy, and difficulty trusting. Curiosity about birth parents and origins is normal, though the intensity varies. And so I know you're asking me what am I afraid of losing or not getting, and for the first time, like in a long time, I just feel like I can't really pinpoint it. Try to take the screen down real quick. So I don't really have an answer for you, and all I can say is that I'm struggling with these here issues that are listed.
So what are the issues you're struggling with?
I just feel like I am having trouble with all of it, all of these bullet points, and it's so hard to like pinpoint any one thing. Like you're having a conversation, and all of a sudden you feel like somebody. Well, here's an example, right? You feel like you're having a conversation with somebody, and you feel like they are not understanding what you're saying, or worse, right? They tell you what you should be doing, right? And that seems simple enough, but I'm finding for other adoptees to be told about their feelings is a big trigger.
Well, I think that for anybody to be told about what they should be feeling, it's a big problem because nobody wants to be told what they're feeling. And but you know, sometimes it's obvious because the person is showing anger. So there's fear that's coming before it. Fear of losing something or not getting something. You don't know what the fear is, but there is a fear.
Yes.
And I couldn't read those things. I'm sorry, but what you was telling me, it sounded like a lot of those points were focusing on people out here and how I fit in with people out here. Is that accurate?
Yes, I like where you're going with this, and it is a lot of external things, like things that, again, that's why I said you sometimes you kind of feel like you're in a bubble, and you don't realize it until you don't have any room left in the bubble, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that looking at what are you, how are you seeing yourself as an adopted person is going to be important because it's we can always wonder how other people are thinking about me or what they say or do I fit in with them or what are they accepting me because I'm different or because this isn't my real parents or because whatever i'm I'm thinking that's making me uncomfortable, but it comes down to me and what I'm thinking about me and about the situation. So how are you seeing yourself as an adopted person? Are you able to give yourself, are you a cat or are you seeing how do you see yourself as an adopted person? What are you
So
making that mean?
I don't think I've taken the time to really reflect on it. One thing I'm realizing, and Monica kind of pointed this out along the way, is that so we were home together all summer, and this whole reunion happened late January this year, and so we were together all summer, and summer was rough, and fall hasn't been too much better. But what I'm finding is that I love my wife. I love my wife deeply, but what I'm finding is that for the first time ever, I really don't feel comfortable when she uh, when she goes out. And it's not even a jealousy thing. It's just like I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be away from her. I don't want to be away from my kids. I like, oh my goodness, clocking the minutes until they get home, thinking about everything that we can do together. But now, what am I doing? I'm setting expectations. I'm thinking about all of these things that we're going to do together and how we got to make it all perfect because life is so precious. And that's what I realized through this adoption. And I think that I've been trying to like really rest a lot on that, right? That these feelings of overwhelming emotion and all of this are because I'm just so happy, but I think it's quite the opposite. It's like I'm trying to make sure that everybody near me whom I care about deeply doesn't go too far away. And I really can't remember having such a problem with this my entire life. Or maybe I didn't, I just didn't realize it.
So it sounds like a fear of being alone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And we all face that. We have to face it, at some point or another. Well, we don't have to, but if we face it, then we're going to be able to conquer that fear of being alone. But the best way to conquer the fear of being alone, do you know what it is?
Are you going to tell me to turn my love light on and love myself?
To be alone.
I know it's hard though. It's hard.
But you
It's
see,
it's
it's
overwhelming right now.
it's hard and you're not used to it. And then
Yes.
you have to get through that awkward part so that you can show yourself how you're okay without them right now. Otherwise, you're going to be so needy that you're going to be controlling them, or they're going to feel like you're trying to control them because you don't want them to go here because you can't go. You don't want them to do this because you won't be able to watch it. And then that's going to put restrictions on them. And that fear of being alone is really nothing to do with them.
Yes.
It's all about you and
Yes.
what you're telling yourself about who you are when you're alone, and about what you're focusing on when you're alone. And if I'm alone and I'm focusing on what I want to do with somebody else, or what I hope somebody else does, or hope somebody calls, or whatever, see, then I'm focusing on them and I can't control them. And then, even if they did things to meet my needs emotionally and giving me the "Are you a cat?" it's only gravy. It can't sustain me like my own love does.
Yes.
And so it's about being alone, finding pleasure in that. And, but I got to experience it. It's not about telling myself that I'll be okay. It's about being alone and being okay.
You want to know something? As you when you say that real quick, when I this one thing I've been thinking about is I was in hospitality for quite a while, right? And I've been a dad since I've been 16 years old. And I say this because it wasn't really until I became a stay-at-home dad and had a lot more time to reflect and not hear a work phone and not have be overwhelmed with emails and not be in the next day because I have so many things I need to accomplish. When I had that time to think, I remember being like, okay, this feels good. And, we didn't expect to shortly after be reunited with my biological family. But now, like you're saying, I have time. I have quite a life event transpiring. And I'm realizing that I really haven't been alone in years, whether it be I was, being a caretaker or being a manager in New York City or in Philadelphia where the hustle and bustle never stops, right? Even though I am, you know, um, I'm just not alone, right? There's people around me. My mind doesn't have the chance to shut off, but once my mind had that chance to think, then I really started getting into trouble.
Well, no, 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 you didn't get into trouble. You started to have things come up for you that your unconscious mind was bringing to the attention of your conscious mind, and they caused emotions for you. And sometimes what happens is we think we have to avoid being emotional. I watched a documentary on Stuart Scott. He was a African American announcer for ESPN back in the 90s and into the early 2000s. And he was diagnosed with cancer in '07 and he lasted to 14. But, you know, it was a very moving video and it's called Booyah. And he, it was just, it was just very, it was emotional. And so what happens is that when we're busy, we don't have time to be with ourselves. And because I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do that. And that's why, on page 29 in the book, keeping busy is one of the ways we distract ourselves and try to avoid feeling our feelings. But when you're not busy and, and you got more time because the kids are napping or they're playing with each other and you have more time to yourself, what happens is these things come up. And we can see it as a gift and explore what it is. Look for the emotions that it's bringing me when I'm thinking about it, and then take responsibility for what I'm thinking. Is this coming from a past wound? What is this thinking coming from? And if I take the time to go through all that, I'm going to understand myself better. But if I don't bother to do that because I started to tear up and I don't want to go there, or it started to be a bummer and I don't want to go there. See, then we are avoiding healing that part of our life. And healing is just a place that needs healing is an area where I'm not loving me. I'm wanting love from other people. So I have to learn how to give myself that respect and that understanding and acceptance and caring, appreciation and trust, rather than looking for it from others. And if I don't bother to do that work, if I don't hold my my foot, to the fire, um, then I'm not going to go there. And then it comes out in behavior. Because on page 15 in the book, it says, you know, what we can do with our feelings. We can talk about them. And if we don't talk about them, which you weren't doing because you were, all caught up in yourself. I mean, you did a little talking, I'm sure, but a lot of it was within yourself. And then if we don't talk about it, then we act it out. And when I act out my feelings, that's when I throw things, when I slam doors, when I punch walls, when I hit somebody, when I give somebody the cold shoulder. These are all ways that I'm acting out my feelings. And so if I'm just reacting and what, yeah, see, then I'm not processing. I'm not finding what's the fears, what's the sadnesses, and what's the are you a cat that I need to give to myself. And that's the healing part.
I
And
have a question. Go ahead.
we don't have to go there, but if we don't go there and turn our light on, then we're going to be in the dark.
I listen. I totally agree with you. I want to ask you something real quick. What do you think the statistics are as far as adoption over, we'll say, the last checking his calendar 5 years, 5 years or so? What do you think about adoption? You think it's up? You think it's down? Now people have access to social media. We've all, lived through the '90s. We've all adopted, whether it be through foster care or through maybe perhaps a family's working through infertility and they decide to adopt. So do you think it's up or you think it's down over the last couple of years?
I have no idea, but I'll take a guess. I'm going to say it's down.
All right, let's see. Way down. Way down. All right. So it only goes back to 2023. It only goes back to 2023, and these statistics are listed on travel.state.gov, adoption statistics dashboard. So it looks like the peak for adoption This only goes back to 1999. Was in the 2003, 2004 era, but ever since then, you can see a constant decline the entire time. Now I'm thinking to myself, like, what is it? And I'm thinking about factors that took place across the world, whether it be political or overseas, whatever the case may be. People becoming more aware. Was it a generation that wasn't really having babies? But it's down. It's down. Now, this could just be me jumping into my fears, but I do believe that perhaps by this point, a lot of families have communicated with one another about what it is like adopting, and the reviews are mixed, if you will. And so that might get people lost in their fears about what to do. And so now I'm not just, thinking about people that are adopted at birth for, just to build a family. I'm thinking about children who are in foster care, people who are waiting to get that type of placement, right? Because you have said many times, and I'm finding in my own parenting life and my life in general, that it's routine, right? Not only routine when we can give unconditional love to ourselves and then in turn to others, everything can end up going well, but we all get busy. We get caught up. We say that tomorrow we'll make the time, tomorrow we'll start working on things, X, Y, and Z. But I guess my random advice to anybody who might be thinking about taking on a child who is not their own, from experience, I love my family, I love my friends, but you really have to give this everything you got. If you adopt a child, you have to give it everything you got. Of course, eventually, as John Anthony says, and as we all are learning, you have to end up giving yourself that "Are you a cat?" But I think that there's room for interpretation during those primitive years, and that it's something that really needs to be taken care of with care. It can't just be like, "Oh, I'm placing you in a house. You have food, you have water. Are you good? You good? You alive? Okay. All right, I'm doing my part." I think it's a lot more than that, and I think that gets missed a lot. Just through life, just through the trials
Oh,
of life.
well, of course, yeah, we don't take the time to address all those other things, because we looked for the basics, food, shelter, clothing, you're being provided for. What more do you want?
Well,
You
what do I
know,
owe?
and more do you what?
What more do I owe? Sometimes, what am I doing? I'm doing it all. I'm going to work. I'm feeding you. Isn't that enough? Isn't that good?
Oh, the parent talking to the kid, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, it takes a very special person to adopt somebody else's child because it doesn't come easy like caring about your own biological child. There's there's a dynamic that plays out when it's your own that comes easy, relatively speaking, unless there's been a lot of trauma in that parent's life. And so to and I'm a semi-adopted person,
Yes, very similar. Yes.
because my aunt and uncle adopted me and my father, you know, in the sense that we moved in with them and she was going to play the role of my mother because her sister wanted her to do that. And that's what she told my father. And he said, that's fine as long as I get to come too. And at the time, she didn't have any children. And so she made a commitment to me, and she made a commitment to her sister that she was not going to let anything happen to me. And then 9 months after my mom died, actually 10 months after my mom died, because she died July 4th, and on May 4th, my cousin, who I call my sister, was born, Linda. And then 4 years after that, Darlene was born. And we call each other brother and sisters, but we're cousins. But the thing is that she made a special effort to take me in as hers. And not everybody is capable of doing that, nor are they capable of making the commitment.
Yes,
But really, that's got nothing to do with you
I agree. Yes,
because you've already been through that.
and I understand it.
And they either had the commitment or they didn't, or they did kind of, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, now it's your job as to how are you going to respond to this.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you going to think about yourself? And a lot of times when there's abuse, and especially if it's something like, which I don't think is in your case, sexual abuse or physical abuse, there's because of the way society looks at that, it's real hard for the victim of the abuse. And, you know, society has all this wrath and anger towards the perpetrator, but it's easy to spill over in the thinking of the victim. Like there's something I've been stained, or there's something, I'm flawed, and no, I've experienced something is what I've done. And then how I see myself having gone through that experience is where my power is or where it isn't, because I don't take responsibility for that. I just keep looking for things to change out here, other people or the circumstances or situations. And it's 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 not easy to do the work, and especially in a if I'm doing it on my own and I
Yes.
don't have any other help. One
Yes.
of the
Yes.
things that Stuart Scott talked about is that he when he was getting near the end, and he was saying how you know they gave him this ESPY award, or the Jimmy V award. Jimmy Valvano, who died of cancer and was a basketball coach for the University of North Carolina State, and he and what he said was I'm lost my train of thought there. So Stewart was going through all this, and what he was thinking about himself is, is where the challenge seems to be. It's like you how are you seeing me? His child. He was African American. So he was being seen differently, and but it's really what I'm thinking about me. So, what are you thinking about Ryan because of what you've been through? That's really where you need to go, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, it's actually what you say. One thing that I actually have realized and said out loud that I haven't said ever because I didn't want to speak something in such a way, or I thought that it would be disrespectful, is that as I'm navigating all of these feelings and really trying to think about how I view myself, um, I I can say and thank you God I have not been abused physically or sexually abused. But what I'm finding is that I have felt a certain way about being a teen dad, in the same way, perhaps, in the sense that everybody's looking at me. You know what I mean? I'm a teenager with a child. Okay. And not only that, compounded with other issues that I didn't know were there or would be there later on from being adopted. And so, as you're saying, right, it's just this overwhelming tidal wave of emotions. And then you get through one thing in your life. Okay. I figured that out. And then you get hit by the bigger wave. You know what I mean? Okay. Now, and then it's like, okay, no more, no more. One thing I was thinking about, and I was reading this poem, and hold on. All right, so I'm gonna screen share again. I don't know if I'm gonna read all of these, but one adoptee pretty much wrote a poem. I don't know if a poem, but wrote some few things, and I'm adopted. So we'll just start at the top and see if we skip it through. I'm adopted, but I constantly find myself lost in a crowd of a million people. I'm searching for those who look like me. I'm adopted, yet my search is never over for information pertaining to my heritage, all the family traditions I lost of my biological family. Um, the one that really stuck out to me is the last one, because I must say that this is something that my wife struggles with when it comes to me. And let's see if I can make this bigger. I don't know if I can, but you can see there, I'm adopted, and yeah, I go through a lot of confusing and contradicting feelings, and that has been something that my wife has had to live through recently, that my friends have had to live through. I have these stretches where it's like one day good day, 2 days good day, third day good morning, and then something starts to creep up in the afternoon, and before I can realize it, I'm panicking. I'm starting to think all these terrible things. But you know it was confusing for some people when I was like, they're like, "Oh, I thought you were very happy about meeting your biological family." I was, and I am, but it changes sometimes
Well, it's
depending.
scary because there's a lot
Yeah.
of unknown,
Yes.
you know, and there are things that unfold, about the negative fantasies and the positive
Yes.
fantasies, and it's our thoughts affect our feelings, and that affects my attitude, and then that affects my experience. And so we can have past, and the brain is always making predictions
Yes.
based on past experiences. And so if I've had past wounds that are negative and fearful, it's going to be easy for me to be fantasizing negative fantasies about how something similar is going to happen again. But the other thing that we do with our thinking is we have positive fantasies that we turn into an expectation.
I'm
And if
terrible
that
about that.
expectation isn't met, then, and it comes up short, then I'm devastated. And one of the things that I saw last night watching Booyah with Stuart Scott is he had a very loving relationship with his daughters. And, they were very huggy, and it was really nice, and it was very touching.
hmm
And and then I looked at my life. And, I had all my fantasies, and when I was going to have kids, I was fantasizing some of the same things that he was doing, the relationship that I would have with my daughters, with my children. I didn't know who they were going to be.
hmm
And, and then I find out when push comes to shove, it comes up different, so,
Yeah.
my twins used to sit on my lap, one on each leg in this chair while I was watching TV, and they would be watching, and it was great. But then they just, as they got older, they got away from that. And when they got too big to sit on my lap, and then, it wasn't just the physical part, it was, the emotional pulling away and things like that. And, you know, when I hug my kids at night, I have my youngest daughter, and she gives me a hug. And then I have one of the twins, and she gives me this half
Half
hug.
hug.
And then her twin sister gives me a quarter hug. I mean, it's like
It's
not
the yeah
side to side, and and maybe she'll touch my shoulder,
lower
and then
back, lower
if
back.
I if I touch her, it's like, and I'm going, wow, that's not what I was fantasizing about. But the important thing is, as a parent, I need to accept my children where they are.
Yes.
I don't do them a service if I make them feel guilty because they're not where I wanted them to be.
Yes.
And so I see my job as just trying to be as loving as I'm capable of being, and not get into the hurt reacting of, oh, well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to take this away, I'm going to do this, because that doesn't make things better.
No.
It's just me trying to hurt them because I'm hurting. And as I've done this work with people for all these years, that's such a big factor. The violence that people have when they come to me, it's because one or both of them felt hurt about something the other person did or didn't do, and they're blaming that person for how I'm hurting, and then they're wanting to hurt that person, when in reality, the reason I'm feeling why I'm feeling is because of what I'm thinking about what they're doing or not doing. So I would invite you to look at your thinking about being adopted more than what other people think about you, because until you get straight with Ryan, it's going to be very difficult for you to be straight with anybody else as far as connecting on a loving level, like on all cylinders. That's what I
Yes.
mean by getting straight. It's got nothing to do with high or sober or gay or heterosexual it's just kind of get yourself together.
You want to hear something that might be interesting to you, or actually, I actually label it
Sure.
as a I label it as a factor um, regarding my behavior, perhaps something that enables it, if you will, subconsciously, but it's only something that I really realized recently. I became a dad very young. So we lived with my mother for a majority of the time, from 18 to whenever. I was in another long-term relationship in my early 20s and very briefly lived outside the house. Sure enough, moved back home to my mom's house, and then eventually I met Monica. And then I end up moving into Monica's house because she has a house, and then we end up building a family together. But my point is that I have managed to be on this planet for 37 years. I've never applied for a lease for an apartment. I've never had to try and get a mortgage. I have never gone looking for a house. I've never gone looking for a big, a bank to fund me. I've never done any of that. So in a way, it's sometimes it feels, right, like I've just been handed off constantly. Where in the reality of things, right, what a great life, right? You literally you don't have any of the stresses of the lease or getting the mortgage or any of that. You literally went bop, 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 right? But this is where people get it twisted sometimes, with all due respect. Do we need to give ourselves, are you a cat? Yes, but like you were just saying, when there's two people that want to be loved a certain way and want to be heard in X, Y, and Z, but you have a great life. I'm not saying I don't have a great life. I'm saying that this is how I feel right now. And that mindset is impeding on one of my very important top priority relationships, if
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah. Well, see, there's a factor that plays out, and it's very common with Martians men, um, but women Venetians do it too. And that is, we try to fix the other person that we love who's hurting. And so it's about, and it comes out with parents and their children, where we try to talk our kids out of what they're feeling. And, we try to, you got a great life. What are you talking about? That type of thing, because they're wanting your pain to go away. But your pain is there because of what you're thinking about you, about how you are okay or not okay, you know, and you can see yourself as gifted or not. It's not gifted that I'm looking for. You can see yourself as it's not really privileged. Um, you've been blessed.
Okay?
You've
Yeah.
been blessed to go from
Yes.
from your mother's hands to your mother's hands, you know, and then to Monica's hands, and and that can be a blessing. But if you're thinking positive fantasies that there are certain things that I should be doing as a man and as a 37-year-old, see, then what I'm doing is I'm creating an expectation of who I should be. And then if I come up short, I'm devastated. Not because that short is a bad place, it's because I'm wanting it to be here and, that extra, and it's not. And so it's about learning to accept here where I am, even though it's not there. And, you know, yeah, you're right. You know, a lot of people, having gone through those things, I mean, or have gone through those things by the time they're your age. But, I was older than you before I, you know, finally, you know, purchased a house, you know, and I was able to do it because my dad, was able to help me with the deposit, that
Right.
I picked up the mortgage, but, I couldn't have done it without his help.
Sure, I know that
And,
feeling.
but, I can look at myself and compare myself to, one of my buddies who didn't have that kind of support, or I can just be grateful that I had that, and that making sure that I make the most out of the silver spoon, so to speak, I've been given, and eat well, as opposed to, you know, pissing in my cornflakes and blaming somebody else.
And that's, sometimes something that you can't use, like you just said, it's the self-destructive behavior that I find that plagues a lot of adoptees. So like you're saying, you know, uh, but nobody's pissed in my cornflakes, with all due respect. I'm doing it myself. Does that make
Right.
sense? You know what
That's
I
the
mean?
thing.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
doing it myself because, you know what I mean? So you get that self-destructive behavior sometimes in these situations where you might have something around adoption or abandonment or whatever the case may be. And, like I said, it just takes, and I've spoken to a few adoptees about it. As I said at the beginning, like one of the one things is you like, and I think that this is something for everybody, most people. But if you're struggling with somebody who is going through abandonment, addiction, or whatever the case may be, I know that it seems like, well, can't you just straighten up? And it's like, I'd love to. But I'll tell you what, the fact that you're telling me that you need me to straighten up and that I should is aggravating me more, right? But here's the thing, that response that I just gave to you, I know is not what I want. It's not who I am on any other topic, but this one. Does that make sense?
Right. Because so let's take that. So the idea that somebody accuses you of not having it together, so to speak, to be in a different place emotionally, what's the emotion that you feel?
It's, you know what? Can I was gonna say inadequate, but I'm sure you're gonna say that's not an
That's a
emotion.
thought.
Yes.
And so when you think you're inadequate, of the primary emotions on 29, sadness, disappointment, shame, embarrassment, concern, and fear, which one of those do you think you're feeling?
So I'm finding that it's all of them. But even though I wouldn't change my life for anything when it comes to Alexis, there's no shame and embarrassment, but it was felt in high school being a teen dad. And it's something that, again, because I am so blessed or grateful for Alexis, I never wanted to say that that's how I felt. But what I'm finding is that sometimes you need to say that that's how you felt. It doesn't mean that you regret anything. It doesn't mean that you don't love your child. It doesn't mean that 20 years later you have all figured out how to work through the interesting and unique life of being a teen parent. What it just means is that in that time when you were 16, 17, 18, graduating high school with a 2-year-old child, you felt like all of the eyes on you were on you. And in some cases they were, because I mean, it's pretty interesting, right? I'm not saying that what they thought was negative or good, but what I'm saying is that it's the reality that there's not too many teen parents, teen dads. And so how can you not look in some cases? I'm not saying I was looking for it. I'm not saying it was there, but I'm saying that that's what was felt, because everybody knew me by such. If
Yeah,
I
well,
wasn't getting into trouble, it was for being a parent.
yeah, and I would imagine that there was a lot of judgments going on, by other people, and you're barely able to give yourself "Are you a cat?" at 16, let alone, deal with other people withholding "Are you a cat?" And then, because since we've been, an infant, we are the center of our universe. And so everything that's happening is about us as far as we're concerned, it's happening to me. And when we have that young mind, it's real easy for that young brain, it's not developed yet because it hasn't matured, to thinking that there must be something wrong with me because they can't imagine that there would be something wrong with that adult person because we just assume the adults got it all together, So there's nothing wrong with my mom or my real mom, it must be something about me. And even if we don't go there, consciously, there's that nagging because, we see how other people are looking at that. And that's what I was trying to get at before, and I let myself get distracted. When somebody's been abused, because of how society looks at that abuse, it's real easy for the abused person to feel like they're tainted or that they're damaged. And when they've been through an experience that other people their age didn't go through, but it doesn't make them less lovable. And but the only person that can love them is themselves. And at 16, that's it's really, the brain is just starting to be able to do that because it relies on other people's "Are you a cat?" And then it gives it to itself because, "Well, if you love me, I must be lovable," that type of thing. But we have to then go on and continue to know that we're lovable. So you have all these things. I'm adopted. At 16, I have a child. Um, I'm not with the child's mother. All these things that society can look down on. And it's real hard not to have some aspect where I'm looking down on myself. And that's where I have to look that fear that I'm less than and show myself how I am valuable and the worthiness that I have. What is my worth as a person? Not my financial worth, not all of the toys I've accumulated, but who I am as a person. What's my character like? You know, is my word, worth anything? Those types of things. So when I spend more time honoring myself with understanding and acceptance, and then respecting myself and giving myself the Oreo cat, then I'm turning the light on. But if I don't do that for me, then the only other people that can turn the light on is somebody else. But even if they do, it's not going to be the same like when I do. So this is a dynamic that we all struggle with to varying degrees, depending on how much trauma we've had. And people with more trauma in their life are going to struggle with those things more. You know, the whole thing about if you remember the ACE score, the adverse childhood experience, it's 10 questions and it asks, you know, if you've been through, divorce or abuse and all these things. The whole thing about taking that test is that the higher the score you get where you say yes for any of those things that they ask, it's saying the more of an incline your childhood had, like an uphill battle. So if you just had one or two, that's no problem. But when you start to get around four on that, you know, and or higher, it's like there's an incline that I have to, a hill that I have to walk up because I've had all these other things that are challenging me and that I have to overcome. But, I think if we boil it down, it's just areas that I need to do more loving of myself from myself because I didn't get that void filled with whoever it was that was taking care of me, or they were taking care of me, but they didn't give me what I wanted. And so therefore I see that I'm slighted. Yeah. So like an example, okay, so we had Thanksgiving holiday and that Wednesday, you know, or Tuesday night actually, but no school Wednesday. So it's going to be 12 the end of this month. Wanted to stay at a friend's, she's sixth grade. So she stayed there, and then I was working, and my wife went out at 10:30 to go get her at somebody else's house. And I was talking about that with the twins, and I go, "Yeah, that's so unfair. We never got to stay that late with somebody else. Our life was ruined because we never had a chance to make friendships like she does. She gets to have all these friendships when she's young, and we didn't have the opportunity to make that, to do that." And so that's the belief, that's the story that she's creating about her life, and why she's not getting the success that she wants because she had these things that she was quote unquote deprived of, or whatever the reason or the excuse. Because the second dimension, where we blame other things or people, it's a very easy place for all of us to be. And so, I gave myself the "Are you a cat?" about what she was accusing me of, but this is the story that she's telling herself. I know I did the best that I could, and yes, she's right. We didn't let her stay out, late. But I don't think, if it does ruin her life, I don't think it's going to ruin it. It may handicap her in making friends, but it doesn't mean that she can't overcome that. But that's me knowing that. She doesn't know that yet because she hasn't overcome things. She's 15 and she hasn't had that experience. And until we experience overcoming something, we don't know that it's really possible because we haven't experienced it. So I'm throwing a lot out there, so I'll let you talk.
No, it's no problem. Everything you said made sense, and I'm gonna say a few things. So I'm gonna throw a few things at you to what you said. So I when I so the my I grew up in Bucks County, so Bucks County has a lot of resources, maybe some that you've seen or worked with, and they do have resources for families that are experiencing or living through teen pregnancies. And so I was able to attend some of these workshops, if you will. Some of the speakers were teen parents who had lived with it through it themselves and went on to accomplish things. I'll never forget there was one woman, she was a teen mom and she went on to become a nurse, and she was very, very passionate and really telling all of the young ladies that they made the right choice, that just really not putting a spotlight on the whole situation, just saying like, hey, you did the right thing, you're doing the right thing. I know there's gonna be some tough roads ahead, not really hiding anything. But one thing that I realized through being in workshops with other teen parents or soon to be teen parents is that I was in a very good situation, in the sense that the child was going to have a house regardless, that um, everything was going to be okay. But one thing I learned, and I was telling Monica about this recently when we were talking about it, is that there's a lot of parents who say, well, you've decided to become a parent. You're a parent now. That's it. You're 16. You got to figure it out because you made a choice. And in my head, I'm just like, I know that there's parents that think that this is the right thing to do, but like you just said, like that's a baby. You can barely give yourself "Are you a cat?" So instead of being like, "Oh, time for you to grow up," you've made a decision, And a lot of moms, dads, teen parents get left there. One more thing I want to add to that real quick is I've actually reached out to some groups to see if there's anything I can do to work with teen parents in the area. The one person I did have a very good conversation with, and I said, is there any chance that there's a group of teen dads that I could work with? And the response was literally, "Oh, they don't exist." So apparently, young ladies are just procreating on their own at that age. But this is not
They
new.
are.
Yeah, but this is not new. This is something that I was a factor when I was becoming a dad, and I think it's something that's still, um, is a factor in some relationships. But regardless, going back to what you said, I thought that that meant a lot to me, if you will, because sometimes when you hear something, you're like, okay, I'm not crazy, right? So hearing from you, John Anthony, like at 16, you can barely give yourself that, but
Right.
I remember telling myself, nobody really told me. My parents were very supportive as one could be, but I remember telling myself, that's it, that's it. You're grown. You got to do it all on your own now. You
Yep.
gotta. I
Yep.
I think that might have been a little counterproductive.
Well, and that's what you were told, and and you think, okay, I'll take it on, but it's hard. You're going to make mistakes at that age, and you know, I'm sure that the parents, it's easy, to be disappointed because you're too young, or they have their fear. I
Sure.
don't want to be the one who's having to take care of that child
Happens all the time.
financially.
Hmm.
I want you to do that. And so they say you got to do it as a way of trying to motivate you to go out there and start taking care of that child by working and and maybe dropping out of school, and then you're working, but then you don't have a good education, so you can't get a good paying job, and then you struggle, and it's real hard, and you're trying to do it all on your own, but it's hard, at that young age. And you know so but the parent has hurt, so, oh, well, it's on you now, because they don't know what to do with their fear, which is hurt of, how's my child, how's my son, how's my daughter going to take care of this? And, and so then they project it onto the other, what, here, you have the whole thing, you know? So, but the other thing I wanted to say is, the mother of your daughter, every time she walked around, people could look at her and see that she was pregnant
I
and that
thanked her
she
up and down.
was a teenager.
Hmm.
And but when people looked at you, they couldn't tell that you were a father
Nope. Mm-mm.
because you weren't showing any physical signs. And so, you don't have any needs as far as society is concerned. She does. No, you both have needs. And we all have needs. And we can support each other or we can not. So, I've gotten off on some tangents. So to finish up the Stuart Scott thing, he had the ceremony. That Sunday he was in the hospital and he couldn't do anything for himself. And he said, I couldn't do anything anymore. He was emaciated, and his energy and everything. He said, but other people picked up the ball, and so his kids or his girlfriend, or the doctors, they stepped in to support him into being able to stay alive and be motivated to be alive so that he could get the energy to come to that place where they were giving away the award because he knew he was going to get it, so that he could give his talk. And he said, so sometimes you just you give up, but other people will be there for you. It's a team thing, and it's about love from others. Well, that's true, and it's great when you have a family or other people that love you. But a lot of people don't have that team. They are by themselves, or they have a team, but there's such turmoil and fighting on amongst the team members that it's not a pleasant, loving experience. It's just more trauma that they're needing to learn how to deal with. And so just wanted to share that.
No, I want to bounce off of what you just said about Stuart Scott and the team thing, and how you said that they picked up the ball and they got him there, and everybody did their part. I do want to say that that's something that I feel is very important that I'm learning. While we need to give ourselves, "Are you a cat?" Yes, for sure. Um, if you are somebody who is uh, friends or family members with somebody who is working perhaps through something at all, unconditional love can really save a life when there's no judgment, when somebody really has a spiral moment and really goes down and hits rock bottom and has a really bad day, and when you're living through or have lived through certain things in your life, you can really feel like this is it. This is the time that everybody's gonna cut me loose. This is gonna be the one. I've done too much. I've done too much. But when you have some people there that are like, hey, this isn't the end. We really do love you. That to me, I have found some people in my life recently, but I've had you as well. And I do appreciate it, and I really mean it for the same reasons that I appreciate these individuals, which is that there's no judgment when I come looking for support ever, and that to me, I know it can save a life. And so to anybody that needs to work with somebody who they're really going through something, they just can't seem to get a grasp on things or help themselves. Try and find the energy. Try to be the one to really give yourself, are you a cat? Because in that moment, that person might be better off when they see that you're giving it to them, and then they can help themselves. But I think yes, ultimately, like you said, John Anthony, or I don't think I know that I have to give it to myself. And there's a lot of things that I either ignored or didn't realize were there. And I do want to say one thing as we head towards the end. For anybody who might be wondering how complex this situation can be, I leave you with this. Monica was doing the talking when we found my biological family. She was talking to my brother. Um, and she would ask me if I wanted reports, right? If I wanted details about what was being said. And so one day I said, give it to me. And I asked, did my mom think about me? Does my mom think about me? And Monica said, he says she's thought about you every day for 36 years. And suddenly I had felt something that I had never felt my entire life, and it spooked me. I just remember just like screaming like at the top of my lungs, just like, what are you talking about? Because I was angry because I thought I had made peace with all of this my entire life. I thought that everybody on the other side had gone on to do great things and that this adoption had not been for something. And while my life has been great and incredible, and I'm so grateful to have met people like Monica and you and everybody else, um, there's just feelings you didn't even know existed below the surface, and then they pop up later in life, and you're just like, this is a lot sometimes. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, listen, we've talked a lot about adoption tonight. John Anthony, you and I were talking about doing some projects together, and we're talking about it more with our students. So, why don't you go ahead and drop your information if people want to get in touch with you and work with you in your groups or maybe one on one or just get some more information?
Well, the website that they can go to is www.supportivealliance.net. Supportive Alliance being one word, supportivealliance.net. And the phone number is 215-750-0323, and people can reach out that way. And so, and then an email address is contact@supportivealliance.net.
Perfect. Well, it looks like we'll be back again next week with Jackie. It was great having a conversation with you one on one like the old days and like we used to podcast together. So it was great talking with you. And
Yeah,
thank you for always being a great friend and a great resource. And I look forward to doing more things with you in the future.
yeah, thank you. And time went by quick.
It always does when we're talking together.
Yeah.
All right. So, to those of you that tuned in and those of you that might be listening later, thank you so much for your time. And we will talk to you all very soon. Take care.